I've heard many scary stories during my career, but the story I'm about to tell you today is different from all of them. This is the story of Annie, a 25-year-old British journalist who made documentaries about paranormal investigations. Annie did not believe in ghosts or spirits. She believed that every mystery had a logical explanation. She had already exposed many so-called haunted places as fake. But this time, she was about to face something she would never forget. She had heard about the famous and luxurious Langham Hotel in London. People said that room 333 was cursed. Many years ago, a doctor came to the hotel with his wife for their honeymoon. One night, he murdered his wife in that room and then took his own life. Since then, guests claimed that his spirit still haunted room 333. Annie decided to uncover the truth. On a cold November evening, she arrived at the hotel. The hotel looked beautiful and elegant. Huge chandeliers hung from the ceiling, polished floors reflected the lights, and old paintings decorated the walls. At the front desk, Annie showed her reservation. The receptionist smiled at first, but when she saw the room number, her smile disappeared. She stared at the screen for a few seconds. "Is everything okay?" Annie asked. "Yes, ma'am." The receptionist handed her an old metal key. Annie found that strange. Most hotels used key cards. As Annie turned to leave, the receptionist quietly said, "Ma'am, if you see anything strange tonight, don't look into the mirror." Annie stopped. "What do you mean?" But the receptionist only smiled and said nothing. Annie assumed it was just a marketing trick. She took the elevator to the third floor. The moment she stepped out, the atmosphere changed. Downstairs, she could hear people talking. Up here, there was complete silence. The hallway was long and empty. Old paintings stared down from the walls under dim yellow lights. At the very end of the corridor was room 333. Annie grabbed the door handle. It felt ice cold. She opened the door. The room was completely dark. Using her phone's flashlight, she found the light switch. The room was decorated in an old Victorian style. There was a large bed, an antique dressing table, and a huge mirror hanging on the wall. Annie set up her camera and started recording. At first, everything seemed normal. As the night went on, things began to change. The temperature suddenly dropped. A fire was burning in the fireplace, but the room felt freezing cold. Then, her camera turned off by itself. Annie checked the battery. It was fully charged. She turned the camera back on. 5 minutes later, it shut off again. Then, she heard footsteps outside her room, slow, as if someone was walking up and down the hallway. She opened the door. Nobody was there. Around 1 a.m., Annie was sitting on the couch doing research. Eventually, she fell asleep. Suddenly, knock, knock, knock. Someone was at the door. Annie woke up. Then she heard a voice. "Room service, ma'am." She was confused. She hadn't ordered anything. Looking through the peephole, she saw a butler holding a silver tray. Annie opened the door. "I didn't order anything." The butler smiled. "This is for you, ma'am." Slowly, he lifted the lid from the tray. Annie screamed. On the tray was her own severed head. Before she could move, the head opened its eyes. It whispered, "Run." Annie shut her eyes in terror. When she looked again, the butler was gone. The hallway was empty. Shaking with fear, she ran back inside. She checked her camera footage. The memory card had become corrupted. Her audio recorder contained only her scream. Nothing else. Sweat rolled down her forehead. She went into the bathroom and splashed water on her face. Then she looked into the mirror. Her breath stopped. Someone was standing behind her. A tall man. A pale, rotting face. Glowing yellow eyes. Torn Victorian clothing. Long fingernails. Slowly, he reached toward her. Annie spun around, but there was nobody there. Then she remembered the receptionist's warning. "Don't look into the mirror." Now Annie wanted to leave. She grabbed her belongings and rushed to the door, but it wouldn't open. She pulled with all her strength. Nothing. Suddenly, the lights began flickering. On, off, on, off. Every time the room went dark, the man appeared closer. First near the bed, then in the middle of the room, then only a few steps away. Annie screamed, "Help! Someone help me!" But the figure was now standing right in front of her. It grabbed her hair. Then it started dragging her toward the mirror. Annie fought with everything she had, but she couldn't stop it. Then, crash! Her head slammed into the mirror, once, twice, 3 times. The glass began to crack. Blood splattered everywhere. At that moment, voices came from outside. Hotel staff broke down the door and rushed inside. What they saw shocked them. Annie was completely alone. She was smashing her own head into the mirror. There was nobody else in the room. The staff pulled her away. Seconds later, she passed out. The next morning, Annie woke up in the hotel's medical room. She told everyone what had happened. She said a terrifying man had dragged her to the mirror, but nobody believed her. A few days later, a technician managed to recover her corrupted memory card. With trembling hands, Annie watched the footage. At first, she appeared to be alone. Then, in the final frame of the video, the doctor appeared behind her. His face was pale, his eyes glowed yellow, and a horrifying smile stretched across his lips. A second later, the video ended. Annie never showed the footage to anyone. After that night, she quit paranormal investigations forever. Even today, room 333 at the Langham Hotel remains open to guests. But some visitors still claim that late at night, someone watches them from inside the mirror. I've only told this story to a few people, not because they wouldn't believe me, but because I still don't know what really happened that night. One thing I do know: if I hadn't seen one specific thing, I would have forgotten the whole experience. Instead, it changed the way I look at the world forever. Years ago, my friend and I were traveling through Morocco on motorcycles. We loved isolated places. No crowds, no cities, just silence. After a long day riding through the Ouarzazate region, we found a small river beside an empty stretch of land. It looked like the perfect place to spend the night. At least, that's what we thought. While setting up our tent, my friend suddenly stopped. "Do you think someone is already here?" he asked. I looked around. There was nobody. "No. Why?" He stared toward the river for a few seconds, then shook his head. "Never mind." That night felt strange. There was no wind, not even a breeze. Everything was completely still, like the world had stopped breathing. Around 8 p.m., I walked to the river to wash some gear. As I crouched beside the water, I suddenly felt something. A feeling. The unmistakable sensation that someone was standing behind me, watching me. I turned around immediately. Nobody. The riverbank was empty. But for one brief second, I was completely sure someone had been there. Then, crash! A huge rock slammed into the ground just inches from my head. Dirt exploded into my face. I fell backward in shock. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I ran back to the tent. I assumed my friend had thrown it as a joke. But when I saw his face, my stomach dropped. He looked terrified. "I saw something," he whispered. "What?" "When you were at the river," he paused, "I thought I saw someone standing behind you." A chill ran through my body, because that was exactly what I had felt. That night, neither of us could sleep. It felt like something was waiting for us in the darkness, and that feeling only got worse. I don't know when I finally fell asleep, but I woke up suddenly, 2:41 a.m. Something felt wrong. Then I realized what it was. The river had gone silent, completely silent. Hours earlier, we could hear the water flowing. Now there was nothing. My friend was already awake. He was staring at the tent wall. "Do you hear it too?" he asked. I listened carefully. At first, nothing. Then, a sound. Slow, soft, moving toward us. But it didn't sound like footsteps. It sounded like wet fabric being dragged across the ground. Shh, shh, shh. The sound came closer and closer until it stopped directly outside our tent. Then everything went quiet for nearly a full minute. And somehow, that silence was the most terrifying part. Because when you're expecting something to happen and nothing happens, your imagination becomes your worst enemy. Then we heard a voice, very soft, just outside the tent. "Are they asleep?" Every muscle in my body froze. The voice sounded completely human. Then another voice answered, closer this time. "No." My friend grabbed my arm so hard it hurt, because now we knew something. There wasn't one person outside, there were two. Then a third voice spoke. "They know." I could barely breathe. We had never heard anyone approach. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. Then all three voices laughed at the same time. But it wasn't normal laughter. It sounded wrong, like something pretending to be human. Then silence. A few minutes later, the tent zipper slowly moved. A voice whispered, "This place is not yours." Then, "Leave before sunrise." And just like that, everything stopped. 20 minutes later, we packed our gear and left. We didn't wait for daylight. We just wanted to get away. But the real horror didn't begin until the next morning. The next morning, we stopped at a small village. While drinking tea, I pulled out my camera. I started scrolling through the photos from the previous evening. Then I saw something. In one picture, across the river, someone was standing there. A dark figure, motionless. I zoomed in. My heart nearly stopped. The figure wasn't looking at the camera. It wasn't looking at my friend. It was staring directly at the spot where I had been standing. Then I noticed something even worse. I hadn't taken the photo, because I was inside it. My friend was inside it too. Both of us were visible in the picture, which meant someone else had taken it, a third person. But that was impossible. We had been completely alone. At least, that's what we believed. For years, I kept that photo. Then one night, I decided to zoom in again. That's when I noticed something I had never seen before. Behind the dark figure, there was another person, barely visible, almost hidden. I enhanced the image, increased the contrast, zoomed in further, and then my blood ran cold, because I recognized the face. It wasn't a stranger. It was the same man who had served us tea that morning. The same man who listened to our story and said only one thing: "You're lucky you left before sunrise." The problem was, we met him the next day. But the photo had been taken hours earlier, which means only two explanations are possible. Either that man was at the campsite that night, or he somehow already knew what was going to happen to us. And even now, I don't know which possibility scares me more.